When a huge company moves into a town, what's its real impact? Is it a good thing, a bad thing? It's usually this tangled mess of benefits and harms, right? Well, in today's Explainer, we're going to unpack a really cool framework that's designed to slice through all that complexity and actually put a number on it.
Okay, so let's dive right in with a real-world kind of scenario. Because honestly, nothing shows that tension between a big company and a small community quite like a fight over one single crucial resource: water.
So here's the setup. You've got this big mining operation, and it needs a ton of water from a river just to run its machines. But right downstream from that mine, you've got farming communities, and their whole world, their crops, their money, their entire way of life, it all depends on that exact same river. You can see where this is going. It's a classic collision course. And for the folks downstream, well, the effects are immediate and they're pretty severe. Less water means they can't grow as much, and that just tanks their income. But it's not just about the money. The environmental damage starts to pile up too, with things like land erosion starting to really scar the landscape. So how do we even start to analyze a mess like this in a structured way? I mean, beyond just saying, hey, this is bad for the farmers. We need a map, some way to actually visualize the impact.
The very first step is to get our heads around this key concept, the area of influence. Just think of it like the project's total footprint. It's the entire geographic zone that feels all the ripples, social, economic, and environmental, from what the company is doing.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We can actually classify communities into 3 zones. First, you've got the folks inside the area of influence. They feel the most direct impact and they get a value of 1. Then there are the communities near the area. They're close enough to be affected, but are often forgotten when it comes to social projects. They get a higher value of 2. And finally, you have communities far away who are still impacted by things like truck traffic and logistics. They're spread out, so they get a value of 3. It's a system to weigh different kinds of impact. And this isn't just some vague idea either. This is part of a formal methodology. It's a real tool that helps to systematically map out every single stakeholder so we can see clear as day who's being affected and where they are. Okay, so with that framework in our back pocket, let's jump back to our story. What happens when those initial harms we talked about, the ones hitting the farmers, are just completely ignored by the company? Well, the company's first move is to basically wave it off, saying, hey, we've got the legal permits to take this water. But you know what? A piece of paper doesn't fix a dried up farm. So feeling totally unheard, the community members start to organize. And the problem blows up from this quiet suffering into loud public protests right in the streets. So, how does our framework actually quantify this? Remember that community is inside the area of influence. They're suffering from 2 big negative hits: lost income and environmental damage. So the framework assigns this whole situation a value of -1. It's a simple number, but it represents a really complex and damaging reality. But the protests actually work. Faced with all this public pressure, the company has to change its tune. They move from just dismissing the problem to actually negotiating. The whole dynamic starts to shift toward finding a real solution. And the solution they come up with is pretty huge. The company promises to build 2 major things. First, a brand new water reservoir that will supply everyone, the company and the local communities, which is especially important in the dry season. And second, a big, modern hospital in the main city designed to help out the entire region. Okay, so we have a solution on the table. Sounds pretty good, right? But the big question is, how do we measure the positive impact? Who really benefits here? And how can we use our framework to actually calculate the value of it all? So let's break it down. Who gets what? Well, that new reservoir directly helps the communities inside and near the area of influence. That's our Zone 1 and Zone 2 folks. The hospital, though, that's a regional project. It benefits literally everyone, even those communities far away from the mine in Zone 3. And this is where you can really see the power of the framework. It assigns a positive value based on the benefits each zone gets. Zone 1 gets a +1. Zone 2 gets a +2. And Zone 3, which gets the health benefit, gets a +3. See how the values perfectly match the zones we set up earlier? It's pretty brilliant. Now, to get to one single number that represents the total value of this whole solution, the method is super straightforward. We just calculate the average of the values from all 3 of those zones. And that simple calculation gives us a final value of 2. Think about that. We went from a conflict score of -1 to a resolution score of +2.
The framework has just quantified that entire journey from harm to a widespread positive outcome.
So this whole process gives us a nice, clean number. But it also leaves us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? The initial harm, the pain, was really concentrated on one specific group. But the solution spreads the benefits out across a much wider population. So when you balance the scales like that, what does success really look like? And who gets to decide?